I would ask questions like this. First of all, thanks, Michael, for coming. Like, as I mentioned in the email, I'm super interested in the unique challenges that architects at small firms face. And I know you'd have some unique insights. So let me just ask you a couple questions. The first question you could ask is, what are the unique challenges that architects face? Financial challenges that architects face. Another question, did you learn anything about this in school? Did they teach you about this in architecture school? What financial planning or financial management classes did you take in architecture school? Like, I'm thinking of med school and business, right. Even business school. Interesting, right? Like, I have a finance degree. There wasn't a single personal finance class in my finance degree. Right. So what classes did you take? I love these next questions. What are the things you wish you had known 10 years earlier? There's a couple ways to ask it. If you go back 10 years from now and talk to yourself 10 years earlier, what would you tell them? What are the things you suggest they do 10 years ago? What do you wish you had started 10 years ago? Those questions of like, what do you wish? So this is an intentional play here. What are the things you've done really well? Okay, so when it's really well, you're asking about them. I've made this mistake too many times. I've done the opposite. It's really well, ask about them. Because the question I love is the mistakes question. And I used to say, what are the biggest mistakes you've made? And that's fine. And actually, if depending on the relationship, it can be really powerful. But it's so much easier to ask, what are the biggest mistakes you've seen other architects like you make?
What are the things you did well, and what are the mistakes you see other people make? Because
for sure.
Clearly you don't make them as one of the leading architects in town.
You can feel the scars from asking that question wrong, right? So yeah, please benefit from that. And you can break that question down a bit. What are the biggest mistakes you see other senior partners making? What are the biggest mistakes you see young architects making? Right, so that's the success mistake question. Then I also love, this is one of my favorites because it's literally you're asking them. I want to tell you a story about this when we're done, but if you could wave a magic wand and create the perfect relationship with a financial advisor for architects like you, what would it look like? And you can get nitty-gritty here. How often would you talk to the person? How often would you meet? How involved would you be in day-to-day things? Like, how much detail would you want? You can get as nitty-gritty as you want there, but I love just starting broad. If you had a magic wand and you could create the perfect relationship with a financial advisor, what would it look like? And then let's wrap up with a couple. So it's really like 10 questions is a lot, so like, don't think you have to have 50 questions. I loved asking if you were me, what would you have asked? Or what questions did I miss? Here's another way to phrase that. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that I should have? This is such a ridiculous process, because the reason it's so cool and I get so excited is people literally tell you exactly what you need to know. And you're going to have this experience. If you end up writing a white paper, let me get back to the last question, but if you end up writing a white paper about this, this is the experience you will have. I had this experience. I've done this probably 10 times. Every time we handed the paper to somebody, I had this experience at least once. They would look at the paper and then they'd look at me. And suddenly I was like 50% smarter because it was an actual paper with my name on it. Then they would open it, they'd start flipping through mainly just like the call out quotes and the headings. And they'd kind of flip through it and they'd look up and go, how did you know this? And my favorite response was, crazy, Michael. We cared enough to ask you.
Oh,
right? We cared enough to ask some of you. We asked you. Crazy. We asked the people who knew. My favorite last question was, who else? We already talked about this. Who else do you know that would have a unique insight into this that wouldn't mind me spending 15 minutes asking them these questions? And develop a list of those questions. So then you do one or two of those, I think you'll start to have a sense. Here's what I think you look for. Tailwind, energy. Like, wow, I enjoyed that. I learned a lot. Like, our first paper with dentists was called Unchained from the Chair. And the reason it was named that is because at the first 2 interviews, somebody used it. I feel chained to the chair. If I don't go to work, I don't make any money.
Mm-hmm.
That was like their number one problem they were identifying. The number one unique financial problem was my number one asset is the present value of my future earnings. I mean, they didn't use those words, but that's what we discovered. So we called it Unchained from the Chair. Well, there was energy from that, like, oh, that was fun. And so then that's like, do I want to spend more time on this? If I do, keep doing the interviews.
Yep.
Greetings, Carl here. Thanks for listening to Michael and I talking like we do over at the Kitces and Carl podcast. Rooney, so much fun. You know, there's another thing I do called the membership. And I'm going to invite you to take a 7-day free trial and just find out what it's about. In fact, you know what? I'm not going to say any more other than this. It's an invitation to attend a private conversation that you cannot hear anywhere else. Find out what I'm talking about by clicking the link and taking the free trial.